Charles Oliveira is the living embodiment of perseverance personified.
Absolutely. If you look at Charles Oliveira, he's the epitome of why combat sports are the greatest sports on the planet. He's what makes the UFC brilliant.
He is gritty, he is deadly, and most importantly, he is exciting as hell.
The stats don't lie, he's one of the most exciting ever and one of the best ever.
But he wasn't always like that. He didn't dominate everyone with his wrestling. He didn't knock the brain cells out of each of his opponents and beat the champion in 13 seconds. He struggled. He suffered setbacks and was doubted.
Once a coward, always a coward. I'm not calling him a coward, but I'm saying that's you can't just take that away.
Yet, he rose from the ashes like a phoenix to conquer the fantastic beasts of his division and have people taking him seriously.
If you get a guy like Charles Oliveira, who's that good at jiu-jitsu, he could strangle a fucking heavyweight.
The Brazilian grappling wizard is not an ordinary fighter. He is an extraordinary example of how you can conceive, believe, and then achieve your goals. And this is his story. Born and raised in a poverty-stricken neighborhood in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Charles Oliveira's early life was a battle with poverty and illness in the form of a heart murmur and rheumatic fever that almost held little Du Bronx back from making it big in life. But miracles happen to those who believe in them, and Oliveira's wheels of fortunes turned when he walked into Roger Coelho's BJJ gym at 12 years old. The break was like a golden ticket for the Brazilian who grabbed it with both hands, putting his heart, soul, and body on the line to learn the gentle art of destruction, and within just 2 months of training, he was already the champion of Sao Paulo. Oliveira was so good at twisting limbs, breaking bones, and strangling dudes in BJJ that he quickly got bored and opted to try his hands on something more violent and sinister. That something was mixed martial arts, where Oliveira stepped foot at 18, winning 12 fights with 11 finishes to sign with the UFC. At 20 years old, Oliveira was too fresh and raw to face killers with years of experience under their belt. Yet, the young boy's entry into a sport of alpha males was a befitting one. In 2010, Oliveira started his UFC career off against Darren Elkins in what seemed like a tough matchup on paper, and the Brazilian was put under the pump immediately when his opponent lifted him and slammed him to the mat like a rag doll. But just as the fight hit the mat, Oliveira quickly locked in an armbar and bent Elkins' arm enough to earn his first promotional victory. If Oliveira's debut was great, his second UFC bout was even better. In his second UFC outing, Du Bronx faced off against the battle-hardened Efrain Escudero, a mere month following his octagon debut, where the first 2 rounds proved to be an uphill battle for the burgeoning Brazilian sensation, as grappling exchanges didn't quite swing in his favor. However, Oliveira refused to fold under pressure and came into his own in round 3. With Escudero's stamina waning, the young prospect leaped onto his opponent's back and cinched in a chokehold to cut off Escudero's blood supply and earn another big win. Oliveira's incredible rise met an unfortunate fall in his next 2 fights, when he suffered losses at the hands of Jim Miller and Donald "Cowboy" Cerrone. Over the course of the next 4 years, Oliveira consistently bested opponents who weren't considered cream of the crop, but whenever he stepped into the ring against stiffer competition, he often found himself on the losing end. Some of these losses really packed a punch. Take 2015 for example, when he squared off against Max Holloway in his first main event. That bout ended in a tough defeat for the Brazilian, but what followed was truly astonishing. During the fight, Oliveira suffered a serious injury, a micro tear in his esophagus, that left the left side of his body paralyzed for a staggering 4 hours. After his setback against Max Holloway, Oliveira managed to rebound with a victory over Miles Jury. However, his fortunes took a downturn once again as he went 1-3 in his next 4 outings, suffering defeats at the hands of Anthony Pettis, Ricardo Lamas, and Paul Felder. His encounter with Felder was particularly brutal, as the Irish Dragon's punishing elbows from the top position forced Oliveira into tapping to strikes. At that point in time, Oliveira was nothing more than a quitter, who was given a snowball's chance in hell to make it big in MMA. But even that small of a chance was enough for the gritty Brazilian to prove his doubters wrong. For that to happen, though, he obviously needed a change. For instance, bidding farewell to friends and coaches who had been by his side throughout his journey and entering Shoot Boxing to train with the best in Brazil. The shift to Shoot Boxing not only marked a new chapter in Oliveira's life, but also laid the foundation for one of the most remarkable winning streaks ever witnessed in the annals of the UFC. It was a decision that propelled him to new heights of success and cemented his legacy as a true force to be reckoned with in MMA. The start of Oliveira's impressive winning streak began with a victory over Clay the Carpenter Guida at UFC 225. The Brazilian delivered a precise and effective performance, compelling the seasoned veteran to submit in just over 2 minutes with a rear naked choke. 3 months down the line, Oliveira faced off against Christos Giagos in his home turf of Sao Paulo, where he stamped his authority by securing a crucial takedown and establishing control on the ground in round 1. As the fight transitioned into the second round, Oliveira wasted no time in asserting his superiority once again, bringing Giagos to the canvas and catching him in a tight body triangle before sinking in a rear naked choke to set the arena on fire. Do Bronx kept his winning streak alive by avenging his previous loss in his rematch against Jim Miller. Unlike their first fight, Oliveira completely controlled the rematch, getting a quick takedown and smoothly getting past Miller's defenses to make him tap out with a rear naked choke. Next up, it was David Teimour's turn to taste the legendary Sao Paulo power. The first round was a real nail-biter, with the hometown hero taking a couple of nasty eye pokes and a knockdown early on. However, he showed true grit and bounced back fiercely in the latter half of the round, pushing forward with relentless pressure. As the second round kicked off, Oliveira shifted into the fifth gear, pinning Teimour against the cage and unleashing a thunderous upward elbow, followed by a sharp uppercut that rocked Teimour to his core. In a blink, Oliveira locked in an anaconda choke that forced Teimour to tap out. In his next 2 bouts, Oliveira showcased his improved striking skills by first beating the living hell out of Nick Lentz and then scoring a gruesome knockout victory against Jared Gordon. After securing 6 consecutive victories against mid-tier competition, Oliveira sets his sights on taking on the cream of the crop in the MMA world when he faced off against Kevin Lee at UFC Brasilia in 2020. The first round saw both fighters trading blows evenly, with solid shots landing from each side. However, it was in the second round that Oliveira truly stepped up his game, unleashing a flurry of fluid combinations that had Lee struggling to keep pace. Faced with Oliveira's relentless pressure on the feet, Lee attempted to resort to takedowns to gain control. But Oliveira was not to be deterred. In the third round, as Lee continued to grapple for a takedown, Oliveira swiftly countered with a guillotine choke and secured his biggest career win up until that point. Oliveira faced his first major test against a top 5 opponent in perennial contender and former interim champion Tony Ferguson at UFC 256, where fans expected violence given the aggressive nature of the two fighters. However, Oliveira dominated Ferguson on the mat and almost tore the boogeyman's arm off with a brutal armbar in the first round. Despite Ferguson's renowned toughness, he couldn't secure the win and fell out of title contention after a one-sided decision loss. The impressive victory propelled Oliveira into the spotlight, earning him a coveted title shot for the vacant lightweight championship following Khabib Nurmagomedov's retirement. Initially slated to face Dustin Poirier for the belt, Oliveira's path to glory took a twist when Poirier opted for a lucrative bout against Conor McGregor instead. The UFC then booked Oliveira against promotional newcomer Michael Chandler at UFC 262, and for the umpteenth time, Do Bronx was the underdog. The opening round of the title bout heavily favored Michael Chandler, as he unleashed a barrage of significant strikes on Oliveira on the ground. However, the Brazilian showcased his resilience in the second round, stunning Chandler with a powerful left hook that sent him reeling backward. Sensing the opportunity to seize the moment after a decade of trials and triumphs, Oliveira launched a ferocious assault on Chandler, delivering a relentless barrage of strikes that left his opponent's jaw shattered and signaled the end of the fight, and the beginning of Oliveira's reign as champion. Now, defending one's territory often proves to be a tougher challenge than seizing it, especially when your first challenger is the heavy-handed Dustin Poirier, who brutalizes you in the first round by knocking you down twice. But if there's one thing that we have learned about Oliveira over the years, it is that he's often down, but never out. In the second round, Oliveira proved exactly that by securing a takedown and asserting dominance on the mat. As the fight progressed into the third round, Oliveira's wrestling and BJJ proved to be the difference against Poirier, who was choked out midway through. Oliveira's second title defense was initially slated against Justin Gaethje at UFC 274. However, Oliveira's championship reign took a hit when he lost his belt due to coming in half a pound over the weight limit, meaning that only Gaethje was in contention for the title. Despite facing adversity early on and absorbing some heavy shots in the opening round, Oliveira showcased his resilience once again. Midway through the first round, Oliveira turned the tables, stunning Gaethje and swiftly capitalizing by securing his opponent's back and cinching in a fight-ending rear naked choke, reaffirming his status as a dominant force in the lightweight division. Eager to reclaim his title, Oliveira accepted the challenge to face Islam Makhachev at UFC 280, despite his belief that the Dagestani hadn't quite earned a shot at the championship. Nevertheless, for Oliveira, the pursuit of lightweight glory outweighed any reservations about his opponent's credentials. The stage was set, and the two warriors collided in Abu Dhabi. From the opening bell, Makhachev controlled the action both standing and on the ground. Just a minute into the second round, he landed a devastating right hook that sent Oliveira crashing to the canvas. With lightning speed, Makhachev swiftly locked in an arm triangle choke that left Oliveira with no choice but to submit. Once again, Oliveira was down, but he wasn't out. Like a wounded lion itching to assert its dominance in the jungle, Oliveira came out guns blazing against Beneil Dariush at UFC 289, where the Assyrian-American enjoyed some success with solid top control in the opening minutes of the fight. However, Oliveira's tenacity shone through as he regained his footing and delivered a devastating head kick that rattled Dariush to his core. Oliveira finished the job on the follow-up and he was back on the drawing board. Oliveira was later booked to rematch Islam Makhachev at UFC 294, but an injury forced him out of the fight. He is now set to lock horns with the young and hungry Arman Tsarukyan. Will Charles Oliveira continue his reign of terror in the division? Share your thoughts, predictions, and opinions in the comments section below. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell to stay in the loop on all things combat sports. Stay tuned, fight fans.